Cheer Up, Love and Pompoms, written by Fraiser, art and color by Val Wise, published by Oni Press, published in August 11th, 2021. What do you get when you mash together American-style storytelling with Japanese manga tropes? You get this kind of comic book. Now, whether one enjoys this comic book will largely depend on what someone prioritizes in reading comic books. What do I mean by that? Let's find out. If you enjoy these reviews, please do the YouTube thing, help feed the algorithm, and let's start the discussion. The style here is simple and bright, though one could easily come to the conclusion that it is a little bit too simple and too bright. But the overall bright tones matches the overall optimistic nature of the writing, though I may be more on the nitpicking side here, but any objections I have will probably be chalked up to personal bias. At the very least, I'm giving it a star. It is consistent throughout, and the style, though I may not agree with, shouldn't affect how I technically view this book, and technically it does get a star. If you've ever seen the Teen Titans cartoons, not the Teen Titans Go, where the characters are basically caricatures of the ridiculousness of the superhero genre, but also mixed in with that South Park style of humor, this reminds me of the Teen Titans 2003 version, and not in the good way. Like I said before, it feels like the writer and artists are aware of certain tropes that exist in the Japanese manga market, but simply have failed to execute it well here. Things like the distant father, or the chance meeting, or the opposites falling in love, with the overall tone falling flat, and the paneling just reflects it. I'm giving it a star. It is there, but it just falls flat, but that could just be a matter of opinion. At the very least, they haven't overcrowded it, so star. The story centers on our two non-normatives but good at a lot of things characters, Annie and Beatrice. And things are fine when these two characters interact with each other, but when the other characters interact with them, it seems like their only purpose in the story is to move the plot forward, and after that, they don't matter. And thankfully, we don't have the whole "this is how the young kids talk" style of dialogue, so that's a good thing. And the dialogue reflects this whole, the problem isn't you, it's the world kind of dialogue. Except the world doesn't seem to be that much of a problem. It just has a few a-holes, or in this case, rather kind of like the one. I'm giving this a star because it avoids the whole talks like young people kind of thing, which can be a low bar, but it's also a low bar that a lot of people do trip over. An obvious theme here is the LGBT aspect, specifically the T part. All this is tied together with romance, school life, and finding oneself. The usual themes of what one would expect from a story set in high school. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to add anything onto it. Now, if you're thinking that's simply because just having LGBT is enough to add to the genre, then you and I would have very differing opinions. You can cram all the thematic elements you want, but if they aren't executed well, then why bother having it to begin with? There are certain aspects of being LGBT that will always remain mysterious, or at the very least unintuitive for many people. Just like for men, the actual sensation of childbirth is a mystery, but a writer should be able to use the innate empathy that people have to help, kind of bridge the gap, if only a little bit. I am giving this a half a star. The themes are there, I just don't think they're executed well. The plot follows a high school girl doing high school things, doing school activities, doing social activities, falling in love. But it seems that the writer and artist have forgotten what high school is on a basic level. Yes, there are cheerleaders, school dances, and parties at friends' houses, but there isn't that sense of time which kills the believability of the story. It's almost as if they only knew high school from, media. And the little details are pretty much what sells the story here. I am paraphrasing Neele Gaiman here, but when you are telling a story, you are telling a lie, and, this lie, quote unquote, is unraveling very quickly. I am giving it 0 stars on a basic level of just how the story is played out. I just don't think it was polished beyond the idea of making the protagonist a part of the LGBT, and everything else felt like it was tacked on. 3.5 stars and no pluses. I can expect the criticisms of my critiques to fall in line with somehow I am an anti-LGBT bigot or something. To that, I could really care less. I mentioned briefly that this story feels like a bad version of the Teen Titans 2003. And this comes down to basically three big issues that go to the detriment of the book. 1, the incorrect application of tropes. 2, the incorrect high school setting. And 3, the LGBT themes. Let's address them in order. First, I said earlier that this book seems to take the tropes of what you would normally see in Japan and apply it here in this book. If you've ever read a slice of life manga or a sports manga or even a romance manga, you'll recognize the patterns. The protagonist who doesn't want to do the activity, the rival turned lover, the sports aspect of being unexpectedly good, the issues with parents, it's all here, and it's all done incorrectly because there are no sense of stakes or tension here. I mean, they say, college is a big deal. You have to have social activities. Why choose cheerleading? What are the technical aspects? What are the weaknesses of the current quote-unquote team? What about the other characters? None of this is answered, and they're all part of these genres. And because they won't be answered, the reader is expected to fill in the gaps just to focus on the LGBT, which is hammered in, but that takes it away because you're putting all the burden onto the reader, which isn't a good thing. The high school setting is a popular setting for any fiction. It gives a sense of relatability, as most people have gone through some sort of formal education during their teenage years, and what exactly they have gone through can be highly variable at times. After all, no two teenage experiences will be the same, even if they do come from the same school. But even then, there are certain commonalities that they could have focused on. And though this comic isn't the first to incorrectly portray high school, it shouldn't just fall on that excuse to excuse the lazy writing behind it. American high schools can be summarized as mostly a countdown to grades and vacation. The school year is mostly planned out before the year starts, and it is usually soaked in the mundane traditions such as sports events, dances, and tests. But these mundane events are turned into high stakes because for teens, that is what these events are. They are high stakes, even though for an adult, they are pretty mundane. And a lot of that isn't reflected here, and what little we got isn't reflected well at all. Now we get to the third point, the LGBT. Now, centering a story around the LGBT isn't the issue. Even in a conservative country such as Japan, the genre of boys' love or girls' love is big enough that it gets its own section in bookstores and manga shops. Even those of the T variety can find their representation. Though whether or not those representations are good enough, quote unquote, is another issue altogether. But these genres aren't sold simply because they feature the LGBT. Mind you, that is part of their genre, but they go beyond the LGBT. They speak to the universal language of love, and the journey of love, which is a roller coaster of emotions and actions, of reward and heartache, and that drama is applicable to any story of the romance of the spectrum. And simply put, there is no drama here in this comic book. You can't present a problem and then in the next few pages or panels solve it right then and there and make it seem that problem will never go away. And the current issues of the LGBT civil rights movement, at least at the time of this recording, we can see that the problems presented are often never solved. So this makes the book seem superficial because they get that good ending where everybody is happy. But it works against this book because everything is wrapped up in such a nice bow. And life, as we have seen, isn't so kind. I would say that instead of focusing on this epic arc that the creators were going for, it would have been better if they focused on one event, a game, a dance, a date, a dinner with the parents. But it seems they just threw that Hail Mary, and wherever it lands will depend greatly on the reader. I hope you enjoyed this review of Cheer Up, Love, and Pompoms. If you did, please
or even if you didn't, do the YouTube thing, feed the algorithm, help a channel grow, and I hope you are having a good day or good evening. Ciao, everybody.